What's going on, guys? This is RJ Game News USA here, and my God, we got some drama going on. Well, I'm gonna spill the tea. So like, share, and subscribe. Do all that stuff, and let's jump right into it. What are we talking about? We're talking about Caleb Hammer versus D'Angelo and the drama going on around that. So first, let me briefly say who these people are. Caleb Hammer is a YouTuber I've watched for years. I've seen him grow from like 100,000 subs to nearly 3 million. He has a very successful show that I still watch on the regular for the most part, although not quite as much as a year ago or 2 years ago. He's in a beef with D'Angelo, who I guess is also some sort of streamer. I've never heard of him or watched him before in my life, but I did watch his video about Caleb Hammer. And apparently there was a big-ass live stream that Caleb Hammer did, which I don't watch his lives anyway, where he was coping and seething for like 4 hours, about the criticisms D'Angelo had for Caleb. Honestly, I don't get it. Like, maybe it's to fill content for his live show, and D'Angelo is a big enough creator that they could fill content. And we've seen other people go after Caleb Hammer, like Scott Schaefer. There's been some building accusations starting to go against Caleb Hammer. And D'Angelo laid out his case versus Caleb Hammer. But the point was, Caleb Hammer seethed for like 4 hours. And it didn't seem like he was in control of the debate, in control of the conversation. I tend to lean more towards the loser of the interaction is the one that loses their cool the most. And clearly he was the one coping and seething. He was needing a bunch of his employees to go back him up, that he's not racist, that he's not homophobic, that he's not this or that, the other. But bottom line is this: the biggest reason why D'Angelo won this interaction is because Caleb Hammer threatened to sue D'Angelo over D'Angelo's opinions. Again, one of the most overused, ridiculous tropes on all of YouTube is people threatening to sue you over defamation. When it's so crazy, because in Caleb Hammer's thumbnails, a lot of his thumbnails could be listed as defamation towards his guest. Now, he'll tell you, well, my guests they're onboarded, or we get consent, or, all this and that and the other. And that's fine and all. But going to lawsuit level, like he did the same thing with Scott Schaefer, is the most bitch-made move you can think of. It's worse than anything that he criticizes the SJWs for. Now, I want to get into the specific areas where D'Angelo doesn't like Caleb Hammer's show. And let me be clear, there's nothing in there that's lawsuit-worthy. This is simply D'Angelo's opinion of Caleb Hammer and his show, and opinions cannot be sued. And if they are, they'd be thrown out of court. Of course, Caleb Hammer will present it as though, well, I'm rich and I have lawyers and I have unlimited money, I'll just do it anyway. And he may very well. But he hasn't done it against Scott Schaefer yet. So let's keep that in mind. Empty threat, bitch-made move. And as far as D'Angelo's actual criticisms go, let's talk about him. He said Caleb was anti-woman. I believe a lot of Caleb's anti-woman stuff, it's just performative. And Caleb Hammer pretty much acknowledges so on the program, on his live stream he did. But if that's the case, then D'Angelo is correct. You're being anti-woman on purpose to get clicks, which was D'Angelo's criticism. Whether or not you're actually anti-woman is irrelevant. He can't read your mind. You're presenting yourself as such. Your racist comments, same deal. If they're just to get clicks and to build an audience, then that is what D'Angelo's criticism was. So you didn't contradict anything D'Angelo said. Same thing with being sexist, being racist, being homophobic. First of all, Caleb Hammer, it's come out before he's bisexual by 10%, in his own words, right? I've seen the clips of that. So, I mean, can he really be homophobic against, considering the fact that he himself is somewhat gay, at least, is somewhat bi? No, I don't think so, but he sure presents himself as such. Now, my problem is, I actually no problem with a TV show or a YouTube show doing that. My problem is, Caleb Hammer wants to walk it back and then all of a sudden say, well, we're playing a character. Well, this is part of the show. This is just sensationalism for the show. And then act like everybody else is stupid for calling that out. But the reality of it is, you should double down. The reality of it is, you should stand on business. You should say, oh, you think I'm sexist, you think I'm racist, you think I'm this? Okay, think whatever you want. Right? That would be what a thick-skinned person would do. A thin-skinned person would threaten to sue for defamation, like Caleb Hammer did to D'Angelo, or is threatening to do to D'Angelo. So I usually don't side with the SJW lefty crowd when it comes to this kind of stuff. They typically tend to be less free speech. In this case, this is the rare instance where the more free speech person here is actually D'Angelo. The person that's more in the right here is actually D'Angelo. And this is coming from me, somebody who typically would watch Caleb Hammer more and is more of a fan of him. However, I do believe some of the other criticisms D'Angelo put out is true, which is Caleb Hammer used to be more helpful to the guest. He was. Early on in his career, he was a lot more helpful to the guest. And then he transitioned more into being a drama show than a financial show. And clearly it's made bank for him. But my preference for Caleb Hammer was in that middle transition where he was starting to become more drama-filled, but he was still helping the guests. So like 3 years ago, he was all about helping the guests. About 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, he was more in the middle. Like it was dramatized, but he was still helping the guest. Now it's all drama, it's all looks, it's all relationship. Finances are completely on the back burner, and he just acts like a total asshole. And it's not like asshole-ish in like the Gordon Ramsay method or the Simon Cowell method, which is what I think he's going for. He just comes off genuinely as somebody that doesn't give a fuck about people at all. You know, because he's gotten rich. So, like, he's lost his humility. And then the other criticism D'Angelo threw out, which is this is 100% valid, is Caleb Hammer has been selling out. He's sold out. You know, he's promoting stuff that I think are bad financial tools that cost $1,000 for a course. You know, apps that don't work, that have bad ratings. I think that is 100% fair criticism from D'Angelo. And the last thing that D'Angelo pointed out, which is true, is, and Caleb Hammer bans negative criticism constantly. Him and his mods will ban negative criticisms constantly. In fact, every time I talk about Caleb Hammer, I'll get people in my comment sections coming at me a little bit for why am I talking about Caleb Hammer? It's such a grift, right? You're just you're riding off the coattails of his name, blah blah blah, whatever they said last time. Yet Caleb Hammer himself will also say in his live stream that that's what D'Angelo's doing. So let me get this straight. Caleb Hammer is allowed to clickbait. Caleb Hammer is allowed to rage bait. But he isn't actually racist, sexist, or homophobic. Caleb Hammer is allowed to diss on other financial programs and financial classes, but he's allowed to have his own highly priced class. And to boot, on top of that, Caleb Hammer cannot suffer any criticism at all. Meanwhile, he can criticize anybody he wants without consequence in the most derogatory forms possible. So in other words, it's rules for thee, not for me, and that plus the censorship in of itself and, you know, wanting to strike up a lawsuit with D'Angelo is all bitch-made moves. Therefore, I got to give the W here to D'Angelo for just being a pretty sane person throughout the conversation. The lack of seething he has, the confidence he had when speaking, just absolutely buried Caleb Hammer into the ground when Caleb Hammer lacked all the confidence in the world and he needed his own employees who he pays to back him up. Just really bizarre. Somebody that is so multimillionaire rich, why is he putting out more content, making more shows, being more insecure? He should, honest to God, he could be less insecure. He also doesn't need 40, 50, 60 fucking employees just to feed his ego. He literally just honestly needs maybe 3 people to run the show if he wanted. An editor, someone to book the guest and do the onboarding himself, and maybe he can even go down to filming 1 show a week. He'd be financially set for life investing in the stock market anyway. Therefore, that goes to show he likes doing this. He's an egomaniac, no doubt. But bottom line is this. D'Angelo won this interaction, shockingly so. But Caleb Hammer seems to be losing a lot of his interactions. And I noticed the only people that seem to just side with Caleb Hammer, whether it be against Scott Schaefer or whether it be against D'Angelo, is just because Caleb Hammer's popular and people like him. Look, I like him too, and I think his show's good too, honestly. Even with the fact that it has changed over the years, and it's less helpful and more hurtful, I still enjoy it to a degree. But that doesn't mean what Caleb Hammer does is correct. I mean, I think clearly he is still kind of a pervy person. He presents himself as such. I can only react to how he presents himself. What he does off camera, what he does with the guests, with the onboarding, how he is off camera, in person to people. He can be the sweetest man alive. Doesn't matter. He presents himself as one of the biggest jerks and assholes on the internet. Therefore, we must treat him as such. If that makes me retarded, in his words, then I am retarded. Alright, so leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. This is RJ signing out. Have a good one.